The scorching Arizona sun beat down on the cracked asphalt of the auto salvage yard as Elena Vasquez wiped grease from her hands with a worn rag. At Salvage, she had built cactus parts from nothing, a sprawling maze of stripped vehicles and salvaged components that served the mechanics and restorers across 3 counties. What the locals didn't know was that Sergeant Silent Storm Vasquez had once been the Army's most feared marksman, with 47 confirmed kills across 2 deployments in Afghanistan. The rumble of motorcycle engines shattered the desert quiet as a convoy of Harley-Davidsons roared through her front gate. Elena's jaw tightened as she recognized the leader, Viper Morrison, a mountain of a man with arms covered in serpent tattoos and a beard that hadn't seen a razor in years. His crew, the Desert Vipers, had been pushing protection rackets across the county for months. "Nice little setup you got here, lady," Viper called out, dismounting his bike with deliberate slowness. His boots crunched on the gravel as he surveyed her operation with predatory eyes. "Shame if something happened to it." Elena's grandfather Carlos emerged from the office trailer, his weathered hands gripping a walking stick carved from mesquite wood. At 78, he survived the Korean War and built this business from scrap metal and determination. "You boys lost?" Carlos asked, his voice carrying decades of authority despite his frail frame. Viper's eyes narrowed as he studied the old man. "Just having a friendly conversation about neighborhood safety. Lots of accidents happen out here in the desert. Fires, explosions, people disappearing." He spat into the dirt. "But for a reasonable monthly fee, we make sure nothing bad happens." Elena stepped forward, positioning herself between the bikers and her grandfather. "We don't need your protection. Everyone needs protection, sweetheart." Viper's grin revealed gold teeth. "Even tough girls like you." The bikers mounted their machines and roared away, leaving clouds of dust and the stench of burning rubber. That night, Elena found herself staring at the ceiling of her trailer, listening to her grandfather's labored breathing from the next room. His heart condition had been worsening, and the stress of running the business was taking its toll. 3 days later, Elena awoke to the acrid smell of smoke. Racing outside, she found her main garage engulfed in flames. The building that housed her most valuable equipment was being consumed by an inferno that lit up the pre-dawn darkness like a beacon. Spray-painted across her office wall were the words "Pay up or burn." Deputy Sheriff Rick Donovan arrived 40 minutes later, moving with the urgency of a man responding to a parking violation. He stepped out of his patrol car, adjusting his belt and surveying the destruction with practiced indifference. "Looks like you had yourself a fire," he drawled, pulling out a notepad more for show than substance. "Any idea what might have caused it?" "This was arson," Elena said, pointing to the graffiti. "The same bikers who threatened us 3 days ago did this." Donovan barely glanced at the wall. "Hard to prove. Could have been anyone. Vandalism's common out here." He scribbled something meaningless in his pad. "You got insurance?" "That's not the point. Well, that's about all I can do for now." Donovan tipped his hat with mock courtesy. "You folks have a good day." As his patrol car disappeared down the dirt road, Elena's neighbor Rosa Martinez approached from her small auto repair shop next door. The 60-year-old mechanic shook her head at the destruction. "Heard the commotion last night," Rosa said, her voice heavy with concern. "Would have come over, but I was dealing with my own problems." She paused, studying Elena's face. "Deputy, do anything useful?" Elena's jaw tightened. "About what you expect." "Figured as much." Rosa lowered herself onto an overturned oil drum. "You know, if those boys knew who they were dealing with, they might think twice about playing with fire." "That lags behind me," Elena said firmly, kicking at the charred debris. "Sometimes the past comes calling whether we want it to or not," Rosa replied. 30 years fixing engines teaches you that some problems don't go away just because you ignore them." Elena resumed clearing debris, but Rosa's words echoed in her mind. That night, she found herself standing before a locked storage container behind her trailer. Inside, wrapped in military-grade fabric, lay the pieces of her life she tried to leave behind. The next morning arrived with a dust devil dancing across the salvage yard. Elena stepped onto her trailer's small porch, a shotgun resting in the crook of her arm. Restlessness had driven her from bed before sunrise, and she decided to patrol her property perimeter. Moving silently between the rows of street cars, she spotted movement near her copper wire storage area. A young man in desert camouflage was cutting through her fence, both cutters working methodically. Elena recognized the viper tattoo on his neck, fresh ink, barely healed. Planning on paying for that, Elena called out, stepping into view with her shotgun raised. The thief, barely 20, with nervous eyes and shaking hands, dropped his tools and raised his arms. "Please, lady. They'll kill me if I don't bring back something valuable." "That's not my problem," Elena replied, pulling zip ties from her pocket. She secured his hands with efficient military precision. 20 minutes later, Deputy Donovan arrived, his patrol car kicking up dust clouds. He climbed out slowly, surveying the scene with theatrical concern. "Now, Elena, what's all this about?" he asked, helping the thief to his feet with exaggerated gentleness. "Caught him stealing my copper wire. Third incident this week." "Accusations like that are serious business," Donovan said, his friendly mask slipping slightly. "Wouldn't want to start making enemies over misunderstandings." He uncuffed the thief and walked him to the patrol car, but Elena noticed they drove toward town instead of the jail. The message was clear: official channels offered no protection. At the weekly farmers market in nearby Copper Creek, Elena felt the weight of suspicious stares. Former customers avoided her booth, whispering among themselves. At the hardware store, she overheard two ranchers she'd known for years. "Heard her parts are stolen," one muttered. "Viper Morrison says she's running a chop shop operation. Can't risk buying hot merchandise," the other replied. "Sheriff might come asking questions." The Viper's campaign of isolation was working. They were destroying her reputation while positioning themselves as the authority on what was legal and safe. That evening, Elena discovered dead fish floating in her water tank, the same tank that supplied drinking water to her trailer and her grandfather's modest garden. Carlos came onto the porch as she explained what she'd found. "They're trying to poison us slowly," she said, anger building in her voice. "Maybe it's time to call in some favors," Carlos suggested carefully. "You still have friends from the service." Elena spent the next week conducting surveillance from an old mining watchtower overlooking the Viper's compound, a converted auto shop, on the outskirts of town. Through binoculars, she documented their routines, their hierarchy, their weaknesses. Viper arrived each day around noon in his custom chopper, always flanked by two lieutenants. Her intelligence-gathering led her to investigative journalist Maria Santos from the Desert Tribune. Elena presented her evidence of corruption, including photos of Deputy Donovan meeting with known drug dealers behind the Viper's compound. "This could bring down half the county government," Maria said, already taking notes. "But we need more concrete proof." "Give me time," Elena replied. "I'm just getting started." Elena also reached out to Tommy Chang, who ran an electronics repair shop in town. His business had been vandalized twice after refusing to pay protection money. Dr. Sarah Kim, the local veterinarian, had been receiving threats after treating injured animals the Vipers used in illegal fighting rings. "I'm tired of being afraid," Dr. Kim said during their clandestine meeting. "But what can we do against an entire gang?" "We gather evidence, expose the corruption, and take back our community," Elena replied. "But I need your help." The plan took shape over several nights. Using Tommy's technical expertise, Elena would plant surveillance devices in the Viper's compound. Dr. Kim would document the animal abuse for federal charges. Maria would coordinate media exposure once they had sufficient evidence. At midnight, on a moonless night, Elena melted into the shadows surrounding the compound. Years of desert warfare had taught her to move like a ghost across sand and rock. She bypassed their amateur security guards more interested in drinking beer than watching perimeters. Inside the main garage, she planted micro cameras in strategic locations. The stench of motor oil and methamphetamine production filled her nostrils as she worked. Voices from an office at the far end grew louder as someone approached. Elena froze behind a motorcycle lift, becoming one with the machinery. Check the perimeter again, Viper's voice echoed through the space. That army bitch is smarter than she looks. Elena completed her mission and slipped away undetected, but as she reached the fence line, a boot crunched on gravel behind her. Going somewhere. Deputy Donovan stood silhouetted against the compound's security lights, his service weapon drawn. You're under arrest for breaking and entering. I was investigating the kidnapping of my grandfather, Elena replied calmly, not moving her hands toward any weapons. What kidnapping? Donovan sneered. Carlos is perfectly safe. As if on cue, headlights swept across the desert as Maria Santos arrived with a news van and camera crew. Tommy Chong emerged from a surveillance van, pointing sophisticated audio equipment at the confrontation. Deputy Donovan, Maria called out, camera rolling. Care to explain why you're arresting someone investigating crimes you refuse to prosecute? The deputy's face cycled through confusion, anger, and fear. This is police business. Turn off those cameras. This is a public story about corruption, Maria replied. The FBI is reviewing our evidence tomorrow. Elena felt tension ripple through the compound as more Vipers emerged from buildings. Viper Morrison himself appeared, fury radiating from his massive frame. You think some cameras scare us? He snarled, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes as more vehicles arrived. Federal agents Elena had contacted through her military connections. Richard, Maria addressed the deputy by his first name. You lived in this county your whole life. Is this really how you want to end your career? Slowly, reluctantly, Donovan lowered his weapon. Viper exploded with rage, lunging toward Elena, but she sidestepped and used his momentum to send him sprawling into the dirt. FBI. Nobody move. Agent Jennifer Walsh emerged from the darkness with a tactical team, badges gleaming under the floodlights. 6 months later, the sound of hammering filled the salvage yard as community members worked together to rebuild Elena's burned garage. Tommy coordinated the electrical work while Dr. Kim helped organize supplies. Rosa Martinez supervised the younger volunteers with good-natured authority. Elena paused in her work installing new security systems, looking out over the thriving business. The federal grants she received for veteran-owned enterprises had allowed her to modernize operations and expand into renewable energy salvage, solar panels, and wind turbine components. The new sheriff stopped by earlier, Tommy mentioned, wiping sweat from his brow. Said the Community Oversight Board your chairing is getting national attention as a model for rural crime prevention. That evening, Elena and Carlos sat on their trailer's porch, watching the sunset paint the desert mountains in shades of purple and gold. Above them, Elena's army commendation hung framed on the wall not as a threat, but as a reminder of service, sacrifice, and the strength that comes from protecting what matters. Remember what your grandmother used to say about this land? Carlos asked, rocking slowly in his chair. It's not just business and profit, Elena quoted. It's our legacy, our future, our stand against those who would take what we've built. The desert wind carried the scent of creosote and possibility as 3 generations of determination settled into the peaceful night.